So, hello everybody. Welcome to our brand new podcast for the love of books, a show all about books and their authors. Because who doesn't love books? The podcast will feature indie and small press authors who navigate the pioneer and sometimes treacherous waters of self publishing. I will be your host, Emma, and we're going to have a great show with an awesome guest lineup from all over the world. It's an honor for me to introduce my guest author, Diana Plopa. Diana is a prolific writer who has penned 9 books in 9 genres. She's an avid indie author advocate. During the height of the COVID-19 quarantine, when it became clear that all in-person author events would be canceled, she sprung into action and started virtual book festivals on Zoom. And the world has changed since then. Hi, Diana. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you on your podcast. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep, me too. So, what do you like the most about being an indie author and then about being an indie author advocate? That is so unusual, that combination.
Well, for me, it seems like a very natural combination. As an indie author, I like that I have control over my work, both creatively and through my business. And we all, as booksellers, have to be business people as well. So I really enjoy that I get that control. I get to decide what my covers are going to look like. I get to work with the editors that are the best fit for me. When I work creating a children's book, I get to work with the illustrators that are a best fit for me. So I like all the freedom and control that I have. As a business person, I like being an indie author because I get to decide on pricing schemas. I get to decide on my advertising message. I get to decide which platforms I participate in and which I don't. And with a traditionally published author, they don't always have that kind of control over their careers. So I really like having the flexibility that being an indie author provides for both me and my career. As far as being an advocate, well, that just seems like a natural thing to do. I can't imagine not advocating for other people who are in the same boat with me. Other indie authors are struggling the way I am. They're all just as creatively inspired as I am, some more so than I am. And so I want to be on their team. I want to be the cheerleader. I want to shine that spotlight. So being an indie advocate is super, super easy for me. It's just the natural way of being.
And in one of the sessions during the February winter virtual book fest, you talked about how important it is to have an assembled team, an entire team. So let's say somebody's thinking about, all right, I'm going to venture into this indie self-publishing. So who should all be on that team?
Right. I think preparing with a team of really great providers is an important step to managing your career as an indie author. I think so many first-time novice writers get in with a traditional, if they're lucky enough to get in with a traditional press, or they're trying to find an agent to go traditional, they're under this misnomer, this misconception that the trad publisher is just going to do everything for you. And in some cases that's true, but in other cases, as I say, because they do it all for you, you lose the perspective of control. So in building my team, I think it's important to find professionals who do what they do for a living, not just friends and family who are willing to be supportive. That's important in its own right. We have to have those cheerleaders, but we have to have a professional team. So you have to look for a professional editor. You have to look for a professional layout designer to make sure that the interior of your book is laid out professionally and that it fits to, within the standard brackets of what traditional publishing calls the norm. You have some wiggle room there, but it still has to follow some certain guidelines. Illustrators. You don't just want to do stick figure drawings for your children's book. You want illustrators who can really bring your characters to life on the page. And then I think most importantly, as a cover designer, because the cover is the very first impression a reader has of your work. And if they're not drawn to your cover, they won't open the first page. So I think you need to set up a team that helps you with all of those things. I am a professional author. This is what I do for a living, but I'm also a professional editor. I don't edit my own work. I have a professional editor that I hire to edit my work because I think it's a very dangerous path to edit your own work. You miss your own mistakes. You're just too close to it. You have to have that objectivity. So even though I do this for a living, I don't edit my own work ever.
So let's say before I start even thinking about writing a book, how long before I start doing that should I think about the team, the whole team? You know, let's say the editor, you know, the proofreader, the different
everybody. You need to start thinking about developing your team. If the first step is, okay, I want to write a book, I have this idea, maybe I'm going to outline it, maybe I'm not going to outline it and pants it, that's a whole nother conversation. But maybe, you know, I have this idea, I know what I want to write about, kind of, sort of, maybe, and I really am committed to creating this book. The next email you write should be to a professional editor. And then that editor say, hi, I'm interested in writing a book. I need some professional guidance. And that editor will say, okay, here's what you do. Send me your first draft.
Okay.
Break it up into chapters wherever you feel the chapters go. Send me your first draft, and then I will work with you to polish it and fine tune it. Your editor may go through it with you twice, maybe 3 times, to make sure that it's exactly where it needs to be. And your editor will make suggestions like word usage and grammar and where to make page breaks or where to make chapter breaks, where to make scene breaks. They'll help you with all of that. If you're even just a little bit unsure, don't worry, your editor will help you fine tune it. The most important step is get your story on the page. But as you begin writing, connect with an editor so that you can create a relationship with somebody you know you're going to work really well with. That relationship is really paramount to creating a spectacular book. And then once you get through with your first draft, send it to your editor. And then while your editor's working on that first round of edits, reach out to a cover designer and say, I'm creating this book. My first draft is with my editor. Here are some concepts I have for a cover. Can you help me develop cover art? And then again, you might need to talk to 2 or 3 different cover designers before you find one that understands your concept and agrees with the direction you want to go. Everything you do in this industry is about building relationships, whether it's with an editor or a cover designer, a marketer. Everything you do is about building relationships, all the way up to building relationships with your reader. If you don't have relationships, your career is not going to move forward. Right. So don't think that you have to wait to write 100% of the book before you start reaching out to these professionals. Start early. Start having these conversations to create the best relationships that are going to support your work.
And this whole process, approximately from the idea to the finished product, I get often asked this question, very often. How long does it take if there's such a thing as an average or estimate? I know it depends on different genre, but I get that asked a lot.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of people ask me that question as well. And primarily the answer is ambiguous as it sounds. The answer is it depends on the author. It also depends, like you say, on genre. But primarily the length of time it takes to write a book is directly correlated to the passion in the author.
Okay.
If you're willing to sit down and write, the NaNoWriMo guideline, National Novel Writing Month guideline, is 1,667 words a day. That's 50,000 words in a month. If you're willing to sit down and commit that kind of time, make that commitment every day to write, you can probably finish the first draft of your book within 6 months or a year, depending on your genre, your subject matter. And then after that, it can take anywhere from 3 months to another year to get it completely edited and ready to go to press.
Okay.
Again, the length of time to edit depends on your willingness to really sit down and focus on the edit notes that you get and make the corrections and changes and improvements. And it also depends on your editor and how many other projects they're working on simultaneously.
Okay.
So, in all the conversations I've had with indie authors, the average that I've heard within the community to publish a book is a year.
A year. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. Now, I know some authors that do it every 6 months, which I don't understand.
I don't understand that either. How about if you were to describe your daily writing routine? Do you have such a thing as a established daily writing routine?
At one time I did. When I was early in my writing path, I did have a daily routine that I'd sit down every day at 7 o'clock after dinner and I'd write for 2 hours. Now that I'm doing so much advocacy work, I'm not always writing every day.
Okay.
And I have a catalog now of 9 books, and I don't feel as pressured to get the next book out. Okay. When I was in the very beginning, I wanted to get a new book out every 6 months, put this book out. Because I wanted to do festivals where I had lots to offer on the table. Right. I don't feel so frenzied about that anymore. So I'm really taking my time with these next books that I'm working on. But I have an online writing group that meets every Thursday. Before COVID hit, we had a group that was meeting at a local Panera Cafe that met every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. 2 hours of concentrated writing time, not critique, just fingers on the keyboard, get the job done. I find that sense of community is very empowering. And to have that gentle accountability with other people who understand the process, for me is very, it moves my process forward to have other people saying, hey, Diana, how many words did you do? Or, you're not here tonight. Why aren't you here tonight? That kind of a thing. After COVID, through the year of COVID, it was really hard to adjust. And I was doing a lot with festivals and trying to find this new normal. So just recently, I started doing an online writing group that meets through Zoom. We have a Facebook page, and then we meet through Zoom every Thursday from 7 to 9. So I'm getting 2 hours of concentrated writing time every week. Definitely, no questions. And then I'm squeezing in writing where I can in between. If I come up with an idea, I'll sit down for an hour and write. But with all the advocacy things I'm doing, I find that that kind of is taking more concentration than the writing part. But I missed the writing and I missed in community, so I built this new writing group online. But just the other night, last Thursday, I wrote in 2 hours. I think I wrote something like 1,400 words. So,
geez.
Well, for me, I type 120 words a minute because I used to be a transcriptionist. So
I just read it on your website. I just read that.
Yeah. So it's not so hard for me to put words on the page. What I find most challenging is getting into the zone. And for me, that means shut everything else off and just focus on this. So, yeah, that's my biggest challenge.
Also wanted to ask you, how do you balance the different genre? You've already penned 9 different, you're working on 4 more. Do you ever find that it's sometimes conflicting, that it conflicts, or that it complements each other?
They all stand alone as separate projects because they are all separate genres. I have this wacky notion that I want to write 1 book in each of the 35 major genres. So that's on my goal list. It's kind of like ice cream. You don't know which one is your favorite until you try all 31 flavors. So that's kind of how I'm approaching writing. So right now I am writing science fiction, historical fiction. I'm writing a suspense novel written 100% in second person, which is kind of an interesting challenge. And then I'm also writing a political thriller. They're all very separate, compartmentalized stories with very separate, different characters.
Okay.
So it's not hard to work on them simultaneously. And I'm a passionate plotter, so I have very specific outlines and timelines for each book, which gives me the flexibility of when I get an idea for the political thriller, I can jump into that file and write. When I get an idea for the suspense, I can jump into that file and write. So I don't feel a confliction. It's kind of like watching different television programs.
Okay.
When you watch different TV programs, you don't get the characters and the storylines confused because they're all very different.
True.
So that's what I'm doing with my writing, is that they're all so very different. Now, if I was writing 3 books in the same genre, maybe that would be harder for me.
Okay.
But since they're all very, very separate and very, very like in their own boxes, I'm not finding it challenging at all.
Okay.
What's challenging is deciding which book I'm going to write in tonight.
Oh, yes.
Because I have so many ideas happening at the same time.
But then that duck helps you, right? You have that duck that you talk about. Yeah. That must be important, right?
I really believe in the energy of having a muse. I believe that that's a real thing. I don't see it as flaky. I don't see it as make-believe. I think it's real. And my muse is Drake. You can see him back here, where there we go, on my shoulder in that picture. So that's Drake, and he has been with me spiritually since I was 7. In stuffed animal format. In this format, he was a gift when my son was 10 years old. He gave me this stuffed animal and said, you know, Mom, you're talking to yourself at the cafe. People are going to think you're weird. Here's a duck. Talk to the duck instead, and they won't think you're weird. So
it works.
Out of the mouth of a 10-year-old, it made sense. So
it made sense, yeah.
So he writes a great deal of my work, and I just take dictation most of the time.
Oh, all right. Back to promoting books.
Yes.
You're obviously a big promoter for other indie authors. What have you found out as the most efficient so far? I mean, I bet you've tried a lot of different things, but out of all the avenues, we all keep trying. What have you found out as the absolutely most efficient and that connects us the most with readers? I guess we're all looking for that connection with the readers.
Sure, yeah. Before COVID, I would have said book festivals.
Yes.
Going out and going to a festival and meeting readers in the flesh, in person, talking about books, that is by far, I think, the most beneficial thing a writer can do is to go showcase your books at festivals. Mm-hmm. During COVID, it was very difficult. We couldn't go do that. Right. So what I've learned to do is kind of shift my focus and marketing attention to social media. And with that, you have to have a new understanding that social media doesn't necessarily sell books.
Right.
Kate McNeil talks about this all the time. Mm-hmm. Social media doesn't sell books, but again, creating those relationships with readers is what sells books. So when you're in person meeting somebody for the first time and you get to shake their hand and talk to them, hand them a copy of your book, sign it in person, that relationship building sells books. On social media, you can't do that interpersonal part, but making friends, having open dialogue, having conversations about different aspects of craft, talking about who likes what genre and what draws them to a particular type of writing style. Those conversations all build relationships with readers. And I think if we ignore social media, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
So until we get back to face-to-face, I think social media is important. And Having said that, when we get back to the face-to-face festivals, I don't think we should neglect our social media. We spent all this time building these relationships.
Yes.
And I think it would be foolish to let those relationships go.
Absolutely.
So I think we have to nurture and cultivate both sides of it.
Oh. And over the years, what have you found out that works the least, that people shouldn't even pursue in trying to market or trying to approach different readers? Or what have you found out that works the least?
For me personally, and other authors may have a different experience of this, but for me personally, I had the least effective outreach with direct mail. Just sending out postcards or sending out, blindly go to the post office, sign up for their bulk mail list, send out 250 postcards to people in your zip code. Something very generic like that has worked for me least effectively. And I found it to be a tremendous waste of my resources. Not just to design the postcard, but then the money it takes to mail them. Some people might have good response with it. I don't. I had a 0.01% response return. So that's 0.1% is how many people responded when I sent out those mailers.
Oh, wow.
So it didn't work well for me. Somebody else might have a completely different understanding of it, and they might have a different approach that works better. But for me, that one direction, that direct mail, that was not worth my time and energy. I wouldn't recommend it.
You wouldn't. Okay. And so what do you feel is your niche, like your major niche, if you were to set apart from other indie authors, even though I know this is a better question for politicians, but still we want to set ourselves apart somehow, just like musicians and other artists. So what do you feel sets you apart?
I think the big difference between me and other authors that you'll meet, say, at a book festival, is that I write in multiple genres.
Yeah.
There are very, very few people who have the same. Let me see if I can qualify that. I write in different genres with the same pen name.
Yes.
So there are several authors, many of them are good friends, who write in different genres, but they have a different pen name for each genre. That makes me crazy. I can't imagine what that's like, going to a signing event at a library and somebody calls out a name and it's not my name, but it's the name on the book I just wrote. I can't imagine that pretending to be somebody else. Will I sign the right name on the inside cover? Will I sign the wrong name? So my thing, because I want to write in so many different genres and I want to be very adventurous about that process, is I wanted all of my books to have the same pen name, no matter what genre it was. And I think that's a fairly unusual thing for an author to do. So I think that would be the big distinguishing thing for me.
Yeah, I would agree. What would you recommend to a kid in school who wants to become a serious author?
I love this question.
Not necessarily a famous, but a serious author.
Yeah, I get this question a lot, especially because I used to, before COVID, I taught writing workshops in elementary and middle and high school students. I also taught workshops to senior centers. And this was always the question: if I want to be a writer, what's the most important piece of advice? And no matter the age of the writer, my answer is always, just write.
Just write.
Just sit down and spend time, whether it's on the keyboard or with a pen and paper, spend time every week writing. It doesn't have to be militant. You don't have to, attend 6 different writing groups and a critique group and you don't have to do all that. If you'd rather just write privately, but do it with passion. Do it as if someday somebody's going to pay you to do it. And when you put that kind of energy toward it and that kind of expectation of positive outcome, I think that's where the secret lies. I think the secret lies in, I expect that at some point I'm going to write a book that somebody is going to fall in love with, and it's going to bring me great reward. Whether that's, success on the New York Times bestseller list, or whether that's success that my son runs around and tells everybody he knows that I wrote a book. Whatever success is for you, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you put the energy and the passion into the process.
Into the process.
So the biggest piece of advice I have is just write as often as you can. And even if it's 10 minutes a day, write with passion.
Okay. All right. That's a great advice. Jean Boss has a question. Sure. I think people would like to know what the best avenue is for getting your manuscript proofread and then published.
The best thing I know how to do, aside from hiring an author, is to connect with people in your circle in everyday life, not your family, because your family is going to tell you whatever they think you want to hear.
Okay. All right.
The people outside of your family, maybe coworkers, maybe somebody you work out with at the gym, and hand them your manuscript and say, would you mind just taking a read at this? In the industry, we call that a beta reader. Somebody who looks at it before you send it to your editor.
Okay.
And they'll say, this worked for me. It was really cool. This didn't work for me. Here's why. Did you know that you spelled this word wrong 16 times? Something like that. I think those beta readers, those initial proofreaders, are really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then toward publishing, you have to decide, are you going to go out and hunt for an agent and go traditional, or are you going to go hire your team of professionals and indie publish? Once you make that decision, then the road you follow is pretty much written for you. The biggest decision to make, though, is indie or trad. And for some people, that can be a hard choice. And I would say banter that question around with your friends. Look at the pros and cons, and hang out with friends over coffee or cocoa or whatever it is you like to drink, and say, so I'm thinking about writing this book, and there are two major avenues I can go to do it. What do you think?
Okay.
People in your circle of friends are going to give you really good advice if they care about you, and they'll tell you the truth. So, and then take all of that feedback and then weigh your decision from there.
Okay. And also, where do you find these beta readers? I get that question quite often too. Where do you find the beta readers?
My best suggestion is jump on social media, and whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever social media is your particular brand of poison, go on there and say, hey, I'm looking for beta readers. Is anybody interested? And then usually what I offer is, if somebody is kind enough to be a beta reader for me, I then acknowledge them in the notes and the front end of the book. I say thank you to, so-and-so for being my beta reader. And then I also give them a complimentary copy of the book when it's published.
Okay.
So it's my way of saying thank you for being a beta reader. I appreciate all your help and input, and acknowledging their assistance. I think that's super important to say thank you.
That's great advice. And then I also wanted to touch base about your essay. When did you write that, and what inspired the sacred text?
So the sacred text essay is a concept that I came up with when I first started in the publishing industry back in 2008. I was working for another small press publisher at the time, and I was running into some conflicts because that company was in it for the money potential, not because they were helping authors produce really great works. And I had a conflict with that, and that ultimately was what led me to leave that company. But the sacred text philosophy came out of this. If you take the time, energy, heart, soul, and humanity to put your words on a page, all that goes into doing that, the courageousness, the fearlessness, the dedication, the devotion, the passion, if you put all of that into putting words on a page, I feel I am honor bound to treat what you write as sacred. Whether I agree with it, whether I don't agree with it, whether it's religious text or not religious text. You could be writing erotica. I don't personally enjoy erotica, but if that's what you write, I still am honor bound to give you the respect as if that writing were sacred. I just think that it's an important part of being an author, and certainly an important part of being an author advocate. I don't know that I would be able to support authors the way that I do if I didn't believe that what they write should be revered.
Okay.
And I just believe that for myself. It's some people believe Christ was the Messiah, some don't, some believe in Allah, some don't. I believe that sacred text should be revered and respected, no matter what genre it is. So that's essentially what that essay is, and that essay's on my website, and that's essentially what that comes from. So that philosophy is what guides me in my advocacy work.
That's a very interesting concept, because you took it out of the religious connotation. Usually it has either religious or mythology, and you put it in a greater context, and
Sure.
That's beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to look at anything. We look at the Magna Carta as this very important political document. We should be treating it as sacred. We look at the Constitution as a piece of really important writing. We should be treating it as sacred. Does that mean that it can't go through upgrades and changes and improvements and evolution? Of course not. We still make room for all of that. But the fact that those documents came out of the heart and soul and passion of the people who wrote them, we should ascribe the reverence and respect to those words just as we would to the Bible or the Quran.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. That's
Thank you.
Fascinating. Could you
Thank you. I think
it's
really important. I'm sorry?
Could you read to us for
I would love that. I would love that. I have a short little piece that I'll read. It's about 4.5 minutes long.
Okay.
This is from my book, Free Will.
Okay.
I wrote this in 2014. This was my second book, my first novel. My first book was memoir. This was my second book. And this is essentially the story of Rachel. She dies, and she finds herself standing between the gates of heaven and hell, and she's told that free will is a real thing. And she has to spend 7 days on a visitor's pass in heaven and 7 days on a visitor's pass in hell, and then after that time, she has to make a decision about where she's going to spend eternity. It came out of the concept of, if you have free will on earth, wouldn't you also have free will after death? That's where the conversation started, was in this context. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about this idea of religion. And so the book came out of that. This is a satirical novel. It is written in tongue-in-cheek. It is not meant to be serious at all.
Okay. At all.
So it's just a fun play in imagination with a concept that's been with us for centuries. So I kind of wanted to flip it inside out and play with it a little bit.
Okay.
So that's what this is. The piece I'm going to read for you now is just a short piece when Rachel arrives at Purgatory.
Okay.
In all the stories I heard, I was led to believe that Purgatory was where the dead waited to be judged. I imagined park benches filled with the wretched waiting, those who knew their name wasn't inscribed in the book of life, those who knew they had a sin file, and those who were just waiting for someone to call their number and escort them out. Not in my wildest dreams did I ever conceive that Purgatory might actually be a resort town. As we entered the inn, I was immediately comforted by the soft aroma of chocolate chip cookies baking. It made my mouth water for a glass of milk. As we moved further into the foyer, I felt the energy of several pairs of eyes staring at me, but saw no bodies attached to them. Liza made no attempt to explain anything. she simply took my hand again and led me up the stairs. As we climbed each step higher and higher, I had that first day of school anxiety welling up in the pit of my stomach. I thought I might hurl at any moment. We stepped out. We stopped out about halfway down the corridor, and Liza pointed out my room on the left. Well, here you are, number 16. Liza tapped the doorknob as she was too short to reach the number higher up, and opened the door. Usually, we like to give our guests the sensation of the familiar when they first visit, and make the space here look and feel more like their old bedroom on Earth, to reduce the panic. But you seem acclimated enough, so I think we can forego all that theater and just be normal, wouldn't you agree? Standing about 2 paces inside the room, I lifted the pint-sized Liza by her armpits and brought her to eye level. My voice was fever-pitched. Normal? Are you kidding me? I put a slightly frantic Liza down, slouched into the chair near the dresser, and pointed out the window at the nothing. There's nothing normal about this place. Any of it. This is nuts. I stood up again and began pacing the length of the room, with Liza standing in the doorway, bracing for an earthquake. Test driving heaven and hell. This is supposed to be normal? No, this is the very last thing that normal looks like. If things were normal around here, I'd be called to appear before the big book of life, and someone like, I don't know, God maybe, would tell me if I deserved to live out in eternity in heaven. And if I'd been a particularly bad girl, he sends me to a really uncomfortable place called hell, with no chance of parole or appeal. I was completely prepared for that scenario. All of humanity is prepared for that. We expected it. It's what you told us was the truth. I've got a leather-bound book filled with wonderfully challenging prose back in my apartment that says so. It's even been on the New York Times bestseller list. Who would dispute the New York Times, after all? I had regained my balance and lost my mind. My forehead was beginning to sweat. My voice was crackling from the strain. My arms were flailing, and the tips of my ears began to heat to what I was sure was a lovely shade of magenta. And now you tell me that God's on sabbatical and we get to choose our eternal destination, salvation, or damnation ourselves? What were all of those years of atonement and repentance for? All of those mitzvahs and Sabbath candles, the incalculable hours spent in Sunday school, all those days of fasting and cleansing. What was it all for, if not to show him our devotion and worthiness? Really? All the rigmarole for nothing? It was all pointless? Is that what you're telling me? I was too far gone to stop now. I'd reached the precipice of death's reality and jumped off the ledge, sans parachute. You know what I think? I think it's time we wrote a new book to make sure humanity gets the message right this time. Clearly, there was a clerical error, or a problem with translation, or something, but whoever wrote it the first time got it wrong. See, this is what happens when you try to do things by committee over too much time. They get it wrong. This isn't normal. This is insane. I'd been in such a froth I didn't notice the goon squad that Liza had summoned. Before I knew it, one had each of my arms, and they forced me to my knees. Liza moved toward me with cheetah speed. I felt a sudden pinch in my neck and quickly collapsed as the goons dropped me onto the bed. Call it magic, call it advanced pharmaceuticals, whatever it was, it calmed me immediately, and I slept placidly for quite a while, dreaming of everything and of the nothing I now knew encapsulated it all.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Diana.
I appreciate the indulgence. Thank you very much.
That was entertaining. Any parting shots?
Yeah. Thank you for thinking about parting shots. I really enjoyed this time with you, Emma. I'm so glad that we've become friends over these festivals over the past year. And I look forward to more writing from you. I think that's going to be great. And as far as anyone else watching or listening today, just keep doing it. Keep writing. reach out. I'm on Facebook at pagespromotions.com. You can find us at the website or on Facebook, and I'm more than willing to mentor and advocate for anyone who wants to take on this crazy challenge of indie publishing.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you,
You're
Diana.
welcome. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks.